Have you noticed how there are some people that just seem to be able to predict where the market may be going in the coming years? These people that executives count on for strategic decisions, for important product decisions. Some people that seem to mind meld with their customers. They are able to see knowledge flowing in both directions. In this episode, I want to talk about the concept called product sense. What it is, what it's not, and how you can and should make every effort to develop this sense in yourself. Marty, welcome back to Product Therapy.
Thanks, Christian. Good to be back.
Always good to see you, and congrats on all of the work with Transform and the journey so far. Marty, I am excited about this episode, but first, before we go deep, I want to really talk about this word, product sense. I never really heard it when I was doing product work early in my career. It wasn't something people actually described. When I started hearing it, it sounded like an excuse for some people have some gift that others don't. But kind of over time, I started to get this sense of, well, are they trying to reflect something that we've built over time, a muscle in our bone? Maybe help me with your definition of what product sense is, and more importantly, what it's not.
I actually have the same history. For years, I avoided using that term product sense because I kept getting bothered because people would talk about product sense like it was some gift that you were born with, like this amazing sense of smell or sense of taste. And like, what can you do about that? I don't know how to develop your sense of smell. Maybe you can. I don't know, or sense of taste. But product sense, I'm like, that's not what product sense is. And when they think of it as innate, something you're born with, then it becomes like an excuse, right? It's like, well, you have it or you don't. And that really bothers me. And so for many years, I would not use that term intentionally. In fact, in my early writing, I used the phrase, do your homework. It means go out there and do the work with customers so you know what you're talking about, so you know the customers, you know what they're like, you know what their issues are, you know what the data says. And I would use as a shorthand, do your homework. Yes. Now that's pretty vague too, and it doesn't really talk about the benefit of of doing your homework. So finally, after a while, if you can't beat them, join them. And instead of just trying to argue with everybody about don't call it product sense, I'm like, all right, okay, well, the world's going to call it product sense. So let's try to explain to people what we really mean by product sense. It's not an innate thing. It's something you can and need to develop. This is very much what I think coaching is about, is helping people develop what we refer to as product sense.
I've always looked at it as this deep knowledge, but beyond the deep knowledge is how do you translate that deep knowledge into the work you have to do, which is, I'm guessing, solve a problem, discover a solution. Early in my career, I used to be amazed that people, you just had this sense of they get it. It's always just kind of what it's like, oh, they get it. Salespeople will be like, oh, they get it. Or marketing people like, they understand the business. And I used to say, is it all the data they've accumulated? Or is it this intuition or gut that they've built over time that they get it? And I think in some ways it's a little combination of both. It's this application of deep knowledge and insights into getting something, how you apply it to good decisions. It's good judgment in product work. It's how you decide what to do, that intuitive ability that your hypotheses are trusted and convincing to other people. Now, Marty, many people often ask me, so when do I need product sense? Like, where can I see an example of good product sense? Like, how do I know someone is demonstrating good product sense? What are some examples that come to mind for you?
Well, the symptoms are all over. I mean, we see symptoms of people that have good product sense and, unfortunately, bad product sense, meaning they haven't done their homework. They really don't know. In fact, what you said right at the beginning, how senior executives, there are certain people that they learn, wow, this person really knows our customers. They really know how our products are used. They really know the technology trends, and they trust those people. Now, they trust those people because there are probably years of history where they have seen that these people really go out. They're constantly talking to customers. They're constantly sharing what they've learned. They're right at the front of things like new technologies and saying how we could use this to solve longstanding problems. They're the ones that are getting all excited about new data that shows us insights about our customers that we've been wondering about. So the symptoms, I think, are everywhere. The symptoms can be literally you sit down with a customer and in just minutes, the customer can tell you understand. And not only that you understand, but they can tell you care. And you can then see the sort of all the sort of barriers go down. And now you can have this amazing interaction where the product person is learning from the customer is learning from the product person, because like we're on the same wavelength. And it's one of those things, the more visits you do, the more this happens, the quicker this happens. And that sort of sense of flow or whatever you want to call it that we love. And, anybody can see that. The salesperson can see that. And they love, right? Those are the product people they love to bring.
I kind of go back to a vulnerable part of my career because I don't think anybody starts. People talk about the gift of being born with product sense. I don't think anybody starts with product sense or an industry sense in any ways. And, I started my first product job in kind of the HR technology space in job boards. And I actually got into products by winning a competition, like a business innovation competition. And you're competing with everybody in the company submitting ideas. And I just joined the company. I learned about this competition. And right before the competition was due, I had no idea what to submit, what kind of new business. I knew nothing. I just started interviewing people in the company. I was really hunting for an idea that I could submit just to participate in it. And, after I won the competition and got into products, I started to have this kind of stuff like, oh, I know stuff. This is why my idea won. And my next idea was good. And I went to a string where I failed through 17 different ideas. Marty, I blew like $26 million of the company's money in like bad decisions for the company. I was making assumptions from a conference room, just calling engineers, we should build this, like no evidence, no data. And it was probably like, probably in the 8th failure, and I had a nice board meeting where they were like, well, we just probably gave like a 23-year-old a lot of money. And we're surprised that he's making bad decisions. Then I said, my first idea was actually good because I knew nothing. There was some sense of like this intellectual curiosity that I had lost in this failure. And what I started to do was not just study the craft, but when I got out and started spending time with customers, time in the business, really trying to understand the space, the tech trends, it really started to change my trajectory. And for me, the most important product sense element is this sense of humility. That is the cornerstone of our discipline. I don't know how else to state it. We don't know.
I love working with startups. That's kind of one of the most fun parts of what I do. And one of the common anti-patterns in startups is the founder that had previously done a very successful company. And, in that successful company, unavoidably, they have developed a wonderful product sense. They'd probably spent many years immersed in the industry, immersed in their customers, and they'd really done well. And this is kind of human nature. After their exit, they are thinking, I must be awesome. I must be awesome. I know, I beat the odds. And they were awesome, but they don't really know why they were awesome. They think it's because of something inherent. One of the common anti-patterns is they go to that new space and they don't have that product sense because they haven't done that work. They haven't had that humility for a long time. No, it's interesting because I firmly believe, and I don't know how to prove this, I just firmly believe that everybody can develop product sense. I've never met anybody that couldn't. However, I do think that there are some traits that either help you or hinder you for developing product sense. You just tapped into one of the most important, which is humility. If you don't have humility, why would you bother spending your time talking to customers? What are you going to learn from them? Right? Well, most of them are clueless anyway, right? That's probably what you're thinking. They're clueless. We know much more about this. So humility, if the person has that humility, I've known you for a long time. I think you have that deep within you. And I think that's so key to you learning so quickly. You don't have a lot of baggage that gets in the way. It's very common that people do. Another one of those traits is just this sense of curiosity. That's another thing I would say is deep within you. I'd never met a topic you weren't interested about. It's like, oh my God,
Yeah.
this guy seems to know something about everything. And it's because you're naturally curious. And I think most good product people are naturally curious. They want to learn. They're much more interested in the things they don't know than the things they do know.
Right. Right.
Another trait I think that really helps, that's right to the core here, is empathy. A lot of people they don't show empathy until I drag them to a customer and they see people struggling with their products. And then they learn that there's a lot they don't know and a lot they could do better. But if you have empathy, the customer will sense that. They know very quickly if you think they're clueless or if you think they actually know what they're doing. It's just different expertise than you have, and that you're trying to learn from them. So empathy is super important. And I think more generally, some, product people have a genuine desire to get out there and talk to as many users and customers as possible. And other ones don't. Now, again, none of those are things that you can't overcome. Like if you have a good manager that is coaching you or a good product coach, they will press you to get over yourself and get in front of real users and customers. And then they'll see things, how they happen, and they'll see those things get better. I guess there's one other thing we haven't talked about, but it's kind of what we spent the first episode talking about. And if you don't have that sense of agency, you're probably not going to do any of what we're talking about here, right? Because you won't think it matters. You won't think you can help.
It's an interesting cycle, and you're calling out, humility, curiosity, agency. You're calling out empathy. You just reminded me, because when I left this HR tech space, I went to another company in the same space that focused on people finding their first job or an hourly job. And I spent my first 90 days on the job actually adopting a job seeker. I didn't want to make an assumption that what worked for people finding an hourly job will work for everybody else. And I spent every single day, 9 to 5. I will go take the person to interview, spend my whole day in and out, just trying to understand. And this person is saying, look, I took a part-time job because I was underemployed. I had different definitions of what it actually meant to apply to a job, search for a job. And I'm thinking to myself, I am coming to a company with a mission to help millions find work. I will not start that job unless I know what it takes to help one person find a job. And I got deeply immersed in that customer environment. And I couldn't understand what it did to develop my muscle, because I joined the company and I'm sure people were like, well, that boss is useless. He's never come to work for 90 days. But I joined the company. I came with the job seeker and I said, look, there will not be a single day we don't bring job seekers in. We don't bring our customers in to connect with them. But when I joined the company, I've been working for months on a new capability in the app, because they recognized many of their customers were unbanked or underbanked. They didn't have bank accounts, and they were going to integrate it into the app. You could cash your paycheck. I was like, oh, that's so true. The person I spent time with didn't have a bank account. And they said, well, we've done the business modeling and we're going to charge $35 per stuff. And, look at how many millions we will add. I'm thinking to myself, I remember that person's first paycheck. It was like $78.30. And we're going to take $35 out of it. So I'm actually killing the idea. I'm like, there's no way we do that. And, in some ways, there's that I could connect in every single decision and reinforce that, because I could see myself as the customer and I could empathize in my decision making. But it would not happen without some curiosity, without the humility, without taking out all the ego and saying, we don't truly know. And so I really love you calling out those important traits to kind of build this beyond agency. You've got to have curiosity. You have to have a desire to empathize with people and some humility to do it. Now, Marty, I want to go to an example on your end, because many people, if they follow your career, they've heard your story, you actually were an engineer. But over time, you have built kind of an acute sense of the whole discipline of product. How do you keep that muscle going? And how do you continue to stay ahead of kind of that deep understanding of the trends and the market and the business and the industry today?
Well, partly, honestly, this is just an area I've my entire career, always been interested in. So, because if you think about it, when I was doing those software tool products, those were tools for product teams, the developers on those teams. Later, I got really interested. Don't even say later. I've always been interested in both how we build systems, but also how we figure out what to build. And so after, my career after bunch of tools. I did eBay, which is another story because I had to learn about marketplaces very quickly. And that was a lot of fun too. But later I realized, okay, I'm going to go back to what I really, really love, which is helping product teams. But I don't want to help them by providing tools. I want to help them with understanding how good teams work. So technically, take the caveat here that, because what we're really talking about is SVPG. That's why it started Silicon Valley Product Group. But, SVPG is not a product company. We're a service company. It's really advice and methods that we share. That said, that's what I immediately started doing, was sitting down and talking to teams. But now, instead of talking to product teams about the tools they need for their engineers, I was talking to them about how were they actually solving the problems of product discovery? How were they solving the problems of product delivery now that we had this internet-based environment? So I have been immersed in that space, and that's the one, obviously, I've been doing the longest. And, this is the great thing about Product Sense. You never stop learning. I feel like I learn every single week. One of the things that tells me I'm on the right track is whenever I do an article, I just did another one a few days ago, and I get a bunch of emails saying, how did you know this is what we've been struggling with right now? I've literally, so many people have said, do you have microphones in our office? And I'm like, no, the truth is, though, I talk to a whole lot of teams almost every day. And, if you listen, right, if you genuinely listen and you're curious, you learn a tremendous amount. And when you start to see themes, you realize, okay, this is something a lot of people are struggling with. And so even if I've tried to answer it before, it's probably not a very good answer because people are still struggling with it. So it's time to take another shot at that. And that's kind of my world now. I love that. It's, as you know, we're a service company, so it's a little bit different. But yeah, I feel like it's one of those things that every year I get more and more richer product sense of the product industry.
That's magical. And now you're calling on something that I want to make sure we talk about and we don't confuse people with this idea of experience and also domain expertise that people will say, I have been in this industry for 30 years. I have industry sense or institutional knowledge. And does that automatically equate to product sense? Does that mean that, I should be the product manager because I've been here 30 years and I have the best knowledge of things? Maybe say a little about what not to think about in domain or industry expertise when we're thinking about product sets.
The domain expertise is kind of a double-edged sword because obviously on one level, how could you do a product for people if you don't understand what they're trying to do, right? It's like, obviously, if I was doing developer tools for developers, but I didn't know what a developer did, that's one useless product, right out of the gate. On the other hand, if you know too much, sometimes you think you don't need to learn. Right? This gets in the way of the humility. It gets in the way of the curiosity. And a lot of people, they confuse understanding sort of the domain with the dogma associated with this. And so, I could give you lots of examples, but they get kind of wonky around software development. But there's been, over the years, a lot of different methodologies. Object-oriented programming, for example, was a very big one. And, you start to conflate that with the products you need just because that's been a big thing, but it's not always a big thing. And it's not even the biggest thing. So you have to remember to stay humble, to stay open, to listen. And one of the challenges when people have deep domain expertise is that they think that's sort of their superpower, but it's dangerous. Innovation comes when you really take fresh looks at those things. One of the great things going on right now for developers, there's a whole new paradigm of solving problems today with generative AI. And it's a very different way of approaching problem solving. It's probabilistic rather than deterministic. And so there's a lot of people that have been programming in a different way for a long time and are struggling right now to wrap their head around this because they've really become so vested in a particular way. This happens even with things like programming languages. People get very, proprietary over the one they've spent so many years learning. And I was always taught it's just another tool. You pick the right tool for the job. The more languages you know, the better. If you hitch your wagon to one language, you're really limiting your career.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen how kind of that deep domain expertise or kind of leads to dogma, and you see constraints as blockers for you to actually innovate. We can't do this, rather than just we have to innovate within these constraints. And that's what makes the job challenging. And you're reinforcing something that almost makes me feel like if you're not in a constant learning or growth mindset, it's very hard to develop product sets. So it will stall at some point. If you're not continuously curious, you're not humble enough to know that there are things you don't know in an ever-changing world, and things are changing, and you have to stay up to date and continuously learn or evolve. We've kind of talked a lot about product sense, the importance in our work with some stories, but I'm a new product manager. I want to get better. I want to build this muscle. I want to make sure I understand that I have to come in with, take out the ego, humility, be curious. I have to build empathy and have some high sense of agency around this. So give me some practical tips on building or developing my product sets.
I include it in the onboarding plan for every new product person. Because even if they came from a company that's great, what's the chance that product sense is going to help them in this company?
That's right.
It's not very high. So what I want to do is make sure they really develop the foundation, at least the foundation in the first few months. So what does that really mean? I'm still a very big believer in doing what you and I have been talking about. Go out to users and customers, spend as much time as you can, really start to understand. But there's a lot more. I'm going to actually double click on that in a second. So first, really get to know your users and customers. Also immerse in the data. You've got to start to learn your data. How are people using your product? How are they buying your product? How is that usage changing over time? This is the foundation of product, knowing this. And then, of course, you have to learn about your company. Now, this is one of those skills that do transfer from company to company. Once you've learned sort of how sales channels work, how product marketing works, how finance works, you're going to have an advantage at your next company. But there are also going to be differences. And of course, you not only have to learn the constraints, you have to learn the personalities involved. And then the fourth area we want to really go deep in is your competitive landscape. Who are the competitors out there? What are the industry trends? What are the technology trends? So this is all part of that onboarding plan. Now, obviously, in a few months, you're not going to develop 3 years worth of product sense, but you can get off to a really good start. And I like to tell people, there are so many great sources. We've already talked about users and customers, of course, but there's so much you can learn from your own colleagues. For example, customer service people, customer success people.
Yes.
It's interesting, Christian, because literally yesterday I got an email from somebody actually in a company in the Middle East. And he was telling me that I have all these sources of requests. Customer service, sales, customers, all these areas. And he said, what I want is one tool that will take all those sources and prioritize the result for me. And I'm like, well, wouldn't be hard to make a tool like that, especially with the technologies today. But I think you wouldn't want to do that. You are basically sort of abdicating the product sense to a tool. And this is really your added value. Generative AI can help us with this, but I very nervous about the idea of delegating this to a tool.
You describe that, and I'm saying that's really part of the core of what true product management is in a company. All of these inputs that can come from everywhere, like there's some magic that sales knows, engineers know, customer support knows, and in one individual, you are a reflection of all of those inputs in the decisions we make every day on how we build things. I moved my career like from HR tech, marketplaces. I went to M&A in financial services. I was going to be a medical doctor, for those that don't know, in my early career. I mean, these are all industries. My mom will be surprised that I went to financial services. I was surprised I was in financial services myself. But you kind of talk about sales. One of my favorite techniques is kind of, you want to find the smartest person in the company, in the room. Often those people are not the ones that say, I am the smartest person, but, they are often the ones that you can always tell the smartest person, by, if you observe and you listen well, their input in meetings actually translating to, we should do what that person says. Or someone says, check in with this person. Or did you run this by that person? And you're always wondering what's magical about that person's that they bring. And I have found people with good data and insights, but no true ability to translate it. And people that are good at executing, but just empty without any input. But there are these people in the company where you see the smartest person, and I see them in, goodness, you can see engineering, you see some introverts that are just, that is a brilliant mind you have to uncover. When I joined M&A, he was like a sales leader, and he's kind of one of those people they brought him in, but just quickly rose through the ranks and everything. It's like, oh, we're not going to make it ahead of this. Oh, we want to do strategy. Let's make him the head of strategy. Oh, we want to do just any opportunity. If he was not in the room, nobody wanted to make a decision. And so I kind of went to this person and said, I know nothing about this space, and he was going to teach me. And I said, we should do it in one of those conference rooms that, are visible, where everybody could see me learning. Like, I am going to school. And, many people often think like, for me, the psychology behind it is two things. One, people had to see me learn. And two, I wanted people to see him teach me that, I went to his school in some ways. And so I was kind of extending his trust to myself by doing that. But more importantly, it was the single biggest exercise in building my product sense in M&A, because he went deep, into the nature of a deal, the decision makers. And, and the great thing about the relationship, he was comfortable as I was the village idiot following him around, just kind of like laughing about this guy and taking me to meet more people and meet with customers. And he wanted to go from the theory in the classroom to showing me it in the real world. And I don't think anybody in the company can relate that story today, kind of knew how I learned at the M&A space well. But what they cared about was my ability to make good product decisions with good judgment based on the product set. And I say this to people because many people are often embarrassed to say they don't know, to say they are not sure. I don't know the industry. I don't know the business well. I always have to caution people around the humility. It only lasts a minute, meaning in your whole career, there's this moment in which if you go deep and you understand it, people will start to forget like you in school. People forget how you learned. They just care that you know. So a really great example or tip to help people coaching this. Okay. I want to call out some other things here because I want to leave some other things beyond the relationship aspects. If there are tools or, particular case studies, I've seen people develop product sets by, running through products, kind of asking a question, what's the product I love? How was he built? What is the history behind it? One of the stories I remember, former CEO that I worked with always used to make me read biographies or autobiographies. And like he's like, I have a book for you. I need to, whether it's the Steve Jobs book, Abraham Lincoln book. And I got upset with him one day and I said, what am I going to do with Abraham Lincoln's story in this building a product right now? And he goes back and he picks a particular decision around the war. And he kind of asked me about it. And I started to say, he was thinking about this when that happened. And I said, hold up there. He said, people fail to understand that the reason you're reading these stories is not to kind of follow their great timeline, but is the decision-making aspect of it. How did they make critical, hard decisions? What inputs? What did they use? Because the beauty we have is we can see what happens. When you make a decision, you have to wait to see what happens, but you can now look to the history of great leaders, great product people, to see how they made the decision. I was rereading Tony Fadell's book on Build in some ways, and the decision of manufacturing their own screws for a thermostat versus having different variations. Many stakeholders were like, heck no, that's crazy for us to do. But you're kind of thinking critically, like, what were the inputs to drive that decision? And I think many people can build some of their product sets by diving deep into how many great products we built, the things that led up to it. And you're not looking for the magic sauce of, did Steve Jobs have a crystal ball in some ways? You could see how he relied on the inputs of many people, a deep understanding of human behavior, human psychology, marketing, what related to people. And I'm hoping people can build a muscle in that same way. Well, Marty, again, I cannot thank you enough for spending the time on these topics. We've committed this podcast to going behind the craft and really trying to think about the things that we probably don't talk about in some process or tool or framework. We started by talking about coaching agency, and then we spent the last episode on coaching mindset. And today is really coaching product sense. I've been picking topics in this area. I would love to talk about coaching influence, coaching how to think, coaching decision making in some ways, and coaching creativity, and coaching how to build trust. And I think people need to be coached on their career and their journey. So I look forward to those discussions. I think it's meaningful for this industry that we have an opportunity to talk about these topics. Thank you again for another fun session. I will see you all on the next episode of Product Therapy.
Thanks, Christian. Thanks, everybody.
Want to learn more? Until next time, please check out svpg.com. Sign up for our newsletter that Marty Kagan puts out. Join us for one of our workshops near you and get access to all of the articles and content we put out. In addition to our current books, we are very excited about our new book, Transform, which helps companies move to the product model. Marty, why don't you take some time to tell us about Transformed and why we wrote it?
We wrote inspired for product teams. We wrote empowered for product leaders. And the good news is that a lot of people seem to buy that and read it and like it. We love that. However, the most common question we've been getting for years is that the way we describe in that book, the way of working we describe, and how they work today is so different that their first reaction is it even possible to make the degree of change needed in order to move to this product model? And we wanted to answer that question with this book. It's broader than our other books where we're focused on product people. This is focused at everybody in the company, from the CEO on down to every stakeholder who wants to know how they can engage with the product teams constructively. The book talks about a dozen examples of companies that have successfully transformed to the model and what they've been able to do since they've been able to transform. And it talks about really what are the principles that are important in working this way.
Thank you, Marty, for joining us here today. And as always, for sharing your insights. And thank you to everyone for joining us. Until next time, have a good day.
A quick disclaimer: while this podcast is named Product Therapy, it is not hosted by licensed therapists or mental health professionals, and it is in no way a substitute for professional mental health services. We recognize the importance of mental well-being and encourage anyone facing personal difficulties to seek support from qualified professionals. See www.findahelpline.com.